Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Hello, and welcome to the Senior Resources Show. My name is Christine Cary, and I'm the Director of the Town of Colonie Senior Resources Department. Thank you for joining me today. Today I'm very fortunate to have as a guest Katherine Rosenblatt, who is the Long-Term Care Insurance Specialist for the Long-Term Care Insurance Resource Center in Albany County.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. Did I get it all right?
You did.
Okay.
It's a bit of a mouthful. I know that, but you got it right on target.
Well, thanks for joining me. Long-term care insurance is an issue that is a difficult concept for a lot of seniors and non-seniors. People have heard about the plans for a long time. They've heard about long-term care insurance. Not always sure if it's right for them or if it's something they should be pursuing. Can you tell me a little bit about the Long-Term Care Insurance Resource Center and why we are so fortunate to have that here in our county?
Absolutely. Actually, every county in New York State has their own resource center. And we're really here to provide free, unbiased information, education to county residents about what's involved in long-term care planning. So what's the reality of long-term care services that we have available in this community? What are the costs of those services? And then let's look at long-term care insurance and whether or not it might be right for you.
Because you're not an insurance company.
We are not an insurance company. We are not
pushing
agents.
A plan.
We are not pushing a plan at all. It's strictly no sales events that we hold and counseling services that we provide to the community. And that's really our goal, to say, let us help you understand sort of what your future might hold and how you can give yourself some protection as you get older and you might need some services. So we do this through a variety of resources with group presentations, counseling services, and even just sending out some of the material that we have to give people some of that information as they start to consider this topic.
Well, I think it's really important because seniors are living longer.
Yes, they are.
And even when I started in this field 20 years ago, long-term care insurance really wasn't on the table. And folks didn't live as long and live as well as they're living now. And also they are wanting to stay independent, and they really need to have the resources to remain independent. So this is a vehicle to help them to stay independent, which I think is really important.
Absolutely, and seniors do want to stay in their home, and the direction healthcare is going, there really is more of a push to provide the services so that folks can stay in their home, and for folks to be able to understand the services that are out there, what kind of costs people might face, and what are the various options that can pay for some of these costs, so that people understand the Medicaid and Medicare and long-term care insurance and all those pieces that go into considering how you pay for these services as folks get older.
Right, and really before we go any further, it's important that not only seniors listen to this show, but their children or folks who are maybe a few years from retirement and are starting to think about, you know, their long-term care needs and they're planning for those long-term care needs, all should tune into this show, not just seniors.
Absolutely, Chris. And really our target population is folks sort of 40 to 68, which is sort of a random age that we've selected. But the reality is when you're considering long-term care planning and long-term care insurance, the younger you are when you purchase a policy, the cheaper the policy is. And long-term care insurance is also medically underwritten. So if you purchase a policy when you're younger and hopefully do not have medical issues, then it's much easier to purchase a policy, and again, at a lower cost. And this is something that people don't usually come to the table and decide in a week or two that they want to purchase. It is a topic that you need to get some education about. New York State has different varieties of long-term care insurance that folks are able to consider, and that's what requires some of that education and that time to consider it.
Let's talk a little bit about long-term care insurance. What does it cover? Explain the tool for me.
Certainly. Let's talk a little about what long-term care is.
Okay.
Long-term care is really a variety of services, medical and social services that are available to folks, or the services that folks need when they're not able to provide all the care to themselves any longer. And those services can be received at home, in an assisted living facility, or in a nursing home program, as well as some other types of day programs that are available to folks as they need assistance. So folks who might need assistance with bathing, dressing, toileting, eating, those type of things that they have finding more difficulty in caring for themselves, or a spouse even providing that care for them in their residence. So the long-term care insurance policies are set up to provide payments when you need assistance in that type of area.
So it's not your typical what people think about long-term care, going to a nursing home.
No,
That's sort of been the traditional mindset of what a long-term care plan looks like.
Right. And originally that's how a lot of them were written, really just for nursing home coverage. But it's not. And as we were both discussing, people are really looking to stay in their homes for a longer period of time. And healthcare is certainly moving in that direction.
Sure.
So many people use a long-term care policy just for the time that they're at home. And it pays the same way for home care as it does for nursing home care.
It really is. For folks who are just starting to explore this as an option in their long-term care planning, it really does make sense.
Right.
Can you explain what Medicare pays for? Do they pay for any of these long-term care services?
Medicare pays for a very short piece of care in terms of people think you go to a nursing home, it's going to pay for your care. It does not. It'll pay for a certain portion for a short period of time, but it's really not going to pay for an extended time. The average length of stay in nursing homes is 2.5 years at this time. The period that it's going to pay for is a maximum of 100 days and not even 100% of that. So it's really for short term if you meet certain criteria upon entering the nursing home. So it's really quite limited in what it can pay for.
And I think sometimes seniors, before they get to this point that they may need long-term care services, may have been in a nursing home or a rehab facility for a short stay, maybe after breaking a hip or needing
Certainly.
some restorative or rehab, and maybe think that, well, at Medicare paid then, they'll pay now, but that's not.
But
that's
it's not
the
the
way
case,
it works.
right?
No.
Absolutely.
What should an individual consider when they're starting to look at long-term care insurance policies?
Well, I think the thing that I encourage folks to start with is do some basic education, receive some education about what is the reality of long-term care, like we've just been discussing, but certainly in more detail they can receive at a presentation that we conduct or even an individual counseling session. So that people have an understanding of where do they live, what type of care are they hoping to receive at the time that they might need some assistance with this. Is it really their goal to be able to stay at home, or do they think they're more likely to need care, say in a skilled facility, in a nursing home setting? And sometimes that's dependent on what somebody's health has been like over the years, what their family health history has been like, what's the reality of in their community in terms of family or friends, so being able to provide some care for them. It is more difficult for family to provide care. The reality is children are more scattered across the country than they used to be. Some of those networks are not set up the way they were a generation or two ago.
That's very true.
So I sit down with folks and really talk about what are you hoping your future looks like down the road. And it might be 5 years down the road, and it might be 40 years down the road. It just depends on somebody's age when they start to consider this type of policy.
And the beauty of having this program in Albany County is that it is unbiased, and you're not an insurance agent that's
Not
out
at
there
all.
selling a plan. It's
Right.
really like a pre-screening, an educational session that you're able to give people in a very confidential manner.
Right, and it is strictly confidential. And I wanted to share with you a little bit, Chris, about the type of counseling services, excuse me, that we provide. As I said initially, I go out and I do group presentations. I'm hoping to set one up here at the library for the spring to just talk about more in depth what we were discussing here today. And then the counseling services that we provide, and we can go out. I often meet people within their own homes if they're comfortable with that. That's really most convenient for many, including evening and some weekend hours if that's most convenient. So we'll sit down with folks who might just be considering purchasing a policy and don't really understand what it's all about, to folks who might have gone the next step further, might have a couple policies sitting in front of them, and they look really different. Maybe their costs are really different, and they don't understand why. Because it's very easy to compare apples to oranges when you look at these policies. So for me to be able to sit down with folks and say, let's look at these policies, and let me explain to you what the differences are and why the premiums have a cost difference there as well. To those who might have purchased a policy 5-10 years ago, what do you do with those kind of things, like your car insurance? You stick it in the drawer, you hope you don't need it, and then you take it out some point, and you don't really understand what's in there. So let me sit down, go over with you what's in here. Sometimes that's a call from a caregiver. It might be a child of somebody who might be needing to access their services, and they say, you know what, my mom has this policy, I don't understand it, or I can't find the policy, I know what the company is, what's my next step? To even somebody who might have a policy, and gosh, they're having a hard time paying their premiums right now. What can I do about that? So there's really quite a range of services. Basically, if there's residents who have any questions, concerns about long-term care and long-term care insurance specifically, we're really the place to start.
And I'm sure that you welcome adult children or family
absolutely.
caregivers as part of this decision-making process.
Absolutely, we do. And we encourage people to sit down, especially for those who are a bit older, sit down with their children so they have an understanding of either the policy that you have, or if they're likely to be the person who is going to be your spokesperson, especially you might have done a healthcare proxy or a power of attorney form, let your children know what kind of coverage you have, so that if you reach the point that you need some services, either at home or in a skilled facility, your kids know what type of payments might be able to be made on your behalf from your policy.
Well, that's good information, and I think it kind of segues into what types of policies are out there for seniors.
Well, they're
Or
really
non-seniors, actually.
right. Absolutely, it's for
Yeah,
you
it's
can
really
purchase a policy
variety
at any age,
population
right?
to be
Exactly, and
looking
I
at.
fall in that catchment group as well. There are really two groups of policies that are available in New York State. One is a typical, what we call the traditional policy, that you purchase a policy and it has a certain time limit to it. Say it's a 3-year policy. So you might purchase a policy at age 50, and then as you get older, say at age 80 or so, you need to use your policy, and your policy will pay for those 3 years that's the life of that policy. After the end of that policy, you then use your own resources to pay for whatever care you might still require. That's a traditional policy. In New York State, we have something special called the partnership policies. And what a partnership policy is really a combination of a traditional policy that I just spoke of, combined with Medicaid extended coverage. What the Medicaid extended coverage allows you to do is to protect your assets. So New York State, which has a very good Medicaid policy, also including that the county pays a portion to the Medicaid in this state, they're saying, if you purchase a long-term care insurance policy and take some responsibility for your long-term care expenses, when that policy expires, you can then apply for Medicaid, protect your assets either completely or partially. You can go on to Medicaid, and Medicaid will pay for the rest of your long-term care expenses beyond the income contribution that anybody on Medicaid would have to spend. So it's really a great way to take some of that responsibility, give yourself some of the protection, a little bit more independence by having a policy, and then when the time comes, if you're still needing care and your policy expires, you get a notice that's brought down to the social services office and you apply for Medicaid, and they will not look at what assets you have, or they will look at partial, depending on which type of partnership policy there are, as there are two different types.
Well, we're very fortunate to have the New York State Partnership for the long-term care insurance. Are you
Absolutely.
seeing that is the trend, that when people are looking at plans, that is the plan that's most conducive for folks?
I think people are looking at them more closely. You know, one of the first questions they say is, well, gosh, if I can go on to Medicaid afterwards and have that kind of protection, those policies must cost a lot more. While in fact, they do not cost any more. There are certain benefits that are built into the partnership policies that are very important benefits to consider if you're looking at purchasing a policy. So that when folks might have a traditional policy or a partnership policy, the partnership policy might look more expensive, but it might not have the same protection as a traditional policy, because there are certain protection mechanisms that are built into every partnership policy. So that's why it's good to make sure you're comparing those apples to apples. And if you want to compare a traditional policy, make sure that it has the same protection that the partnership policy has. But it really is something quite amazing that New York State offers. One thing that I also want to bring up so people understand that all long-term care insurance policies are portable to any state within the country.
That's important.
So that if you move at some point, you can still receive the benefits from that policy wherever you go in the country.
Yeah, because so many people in the Northeast don't stay here in the winter.
They don't. Now, the one sort of caveat to that is if you have a partnership policy and you've used the basis of your policy and you want to apply for Medicaid, you do need to be back in New York State to receive
Okay.
New York State Medicaid.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Right. Right.
Okay.
So it's not transferable to other states at this time. Down the road, that might change. We don't know.
Well, that's very good information. I think I should probably tell our viewers that individual appointments, that we're kind of just touching on the
Yes.
on the key points of the long-term care
Very key
insurance
points,
today.
right.
So, you are available to meet with people individually, and we'll give that information at
Yes,
the end, how
certainly.
to contact you. Can you tell me what a typical policy costs?
You know what, and that's a question that's also asked often. Unfortunately, there is no typical cost. It depends so much on what is in your policy. Part of your policy, when folks are considering purchasing a policy, there are a number of decisions that you need to make in terms of how much do you want it to pay per day. Do you want it to have something that's called inflation protection, which means that as the years go by, the amount that you purchase it for, how much it'll pay that day, will go up 5% each year. So there are many of these benefits that I just spoke to that are going to affect the cost of it. How long do you want the policy to pay for it? There are the lowest one that I've seen recently from a woman who bought it several years ago was about $900. I think a lot of them these days are probably $2,000 to $5,000, $6,000, $7,000
Per year.
per year. But it depends very much on what you want to have in that policy. And very often when I sit down with people and they have policies in front of them, they say, you know what, this is really more that we can afford. And that's very fair.
Right.
And for some people, long-term care insurance policy is not the right route for them, and that's okay. Medicaid will always be there. There will always be a payment source for what level of care seniors need. But if it's something within the ballpark of what they need, let's look at those benefits that this policy has. And there are a lot of ways that you can sort of tweak the policy, the benefit amount, some of those riders, so that you can make it affordable to you, because it needs to be able to work within somebody's budget.
Absolutely.
And not just during the time when they're working.
Right.
But I encourage people, you need to do some thinking and planning around what might your budget look like when you're retired. To know that you will be paying for it, hopefully, when you are retired, and it needs to be affordable at that time as well.
Yeah, because we don't want this to end up becoming a financial burden for somebody once they retire.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
You don't
that's
want somebody
very
to lose
important. Does the cost of the policies go up on an annual basis?
All long-term care insurance policies are set to not increase, that the premiums remain the same throughout the life of the policy. That said, an insurance company can approach the New York State Insurance Board and ask for a raise in premiums for a whole class of insured folks. They cannot ask for an increase in the premium for one individual. Even if your health changes, your premium cannot be raised just for that reason. It has to be for the class. And there's, at times there are premiums that do go up. Folks can get that information. There's a New York State Insurance website that can provide that information that gives a history of what insurance companies have increased their classes and for what percentage.
That's good to know. Do you see that there's oftentimes an increase in those classes?
It's not often. It does happen here and there. As we all know, the economy is in a different place than it was 6 months a year ago. There's no way to really know what the likelihood is of the economy changing, how that's going to impact these insurance companies.
When you go out to speak, are seniors more receptive, or non-seniors, folks, your target audience?
Sure.
Are they more receptive to this type of insurance than you've seen in the past, or has been the traditional,
I think people are
response
starting to
it?
hear more about it. And the reality is, if you look at demographics, and we do have an aging population in this country, that just by the nature of the shift of the aging population, more people hopefully are starting to think about what are their needs going to be as much as they can plan for, and how do they plan for their future, and people wanting to take some control, protect your assets, have a little bit more say in terms of where you receive your care is an important piece to consider as well. So I think that people will often walk into a presentation and they really don't know much about long-term care insurance, because a lot of people hear about it and think, oh, that's something I need to learn about, and they don't really know where to start. So when we do some of these presentations at libraries and through Lions clubs and Rotaries and through businesses and so forth, the group presentations out in the community are a great way. Get some basic information from us. We always provide an opportunity to have questions and answers afterwards. And then very often I receive calls from folks, a day, a week, a month later saying, gosh, I heard your presentation, but I really need to meet with you one-on-one to reinforce what I heard. There's a lot of details, a lot of terms in this, and we can go over that one-on-one and talk more personally about where you're at in your life and what are your needs going to be.
Right, your own specific needs. Many times when I'm working with an older town resident and their caregivers, their adult children, and it's been a difficult struggle finding a nursing home or the next level of placement that they may need, it really opens adult children's eyes to the fact that mom is going through this now, and this has been a really difficult time. I don't want to get in this situation myself.
Right.
So I do see more and more younger folks asking questions about long-term care insurance, or at least thinking about, I need to have a plan for myself.
Right.
And that's important.
And I agree with you completely, and that's why really at some of our presentations, and even when I'm meeting with people in their own home, my goal is really that they understand long-term care and long-term care planning, because you really can't think about the appropriateness for you of an insurance policy if you don't understand what long-term care is about in the first place.
Absolutely. Now, once you've been through a counseling session with someone and you've kind of spelled out what their options are, and this individual decides that they want to buy a policy, what happens then? Where do you refer these individuals to, or what's the next step?
Well, we can't recommend a specific agent or company or something of that nature, but one of the sheets that I often give out to folks has a listing of all the companies throughout New York State that offer long-term care insurance. I also encourage people, talk to your friends and neighbors. Do they have a policy with a company? Have they worked with a senior care attorney or a financial planner that they might be able to go to, that somebody might have had experience with, and get some information? Maybe that's a point that you start looking at an actual policy and can sit down with somebody and then get an actual quote. And then people will often have me back and say, okay, now I understand what long-term care is and how the insurance plays into it. Now I need you to sit down with me and look at these policies in front of me. And that's fine. I've gotten to know several folks, and certainly with couples as well, sitting down, and it's a second or third visit, and that's absolutely fine. This is a process to understand it, and it's not something that you pick up their brochure, and there's great resources out there that I can provide to folks, but it's not something that usually folks pick up and understand it in a heartbeat, and then you're on to the next step.
Insurance. There's a lot that goes into this process.
Right. And I really want people to think that they are purchasing a policy and not being sold a policy, because there's a real difference there. I want people to be very comfortable if they decide to purchase a policy that it's really right for them.
Oh, that's important. And you touched on briefly before that if folks already have an existing policy, you're available to look it over and see if it still meets their needs.
I would be happy to do that, and I do that often with folks.
And then the folks that already have a policy, can they trade that policy for a partnership policy?
You can't do that. You can't upgrade a policy to make it provide more benefits or anything of that nature. Okay. And certainly depending on somebody's situation, how old they are, how their health is, sometimes people decide, you know what, maybe I purchased this policy 15 years ago and it really doesn't provide that much to me. Maybe I should look at purchasing a second policy. Sometimes people will do that. What I can also do is look at that first policy with them, and depending on their specific benefits, a non-forfeiture benefit, which might allow them to not pay the premiums anymore on that policy, but still have some value to it, still be able to get some premium payments from that when they need care.
Well, that's a great option for folks to be able to do that. Tax breaks, are there any available for people with long-term care insurance?
They are, and it is a very complicated area. So it is something that is best discussed really at a counseling session. I encourage people to talk to financial planners as well, because it does vary from one policy to another. But most policies do have some tax benefits in terms of being the premium payments being exempt from on your state income tax, as well as the payments can be deducted from your federal income tax as long as it meets certain requirements as well.
All right, and probably an individual's financial advisor can give them
absolutely
the appropriate advice in that area.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, When you say you go out to do community presentations, I'm sure residents in the town that are watching this
Yeah.
are going to be interested in obtaining more information or meeting with you individually.
Yeah,
How is the best? What is the best way for an individual to contact you?
The best way to reach me is really on my phone, which I will give you directly. It's 229-1895.
Okay.
Then call me directly at that number, and then I'm happy to get back to them.
Okay.
As we were discussing, I'm hoping to do a presentation here at the library in the springtime, and they'll hopefully see that in the newsletter, as well as we do advertise in the Times Union, the community calendar, and
Right.
things of that nature, and other resources as well.
So seniors can check the community calendar in
Yes.
the Times Union, or residents, and see
Yeah.
where you're going to be if they want to come to a presentation, which I think is always a good way to start when you're starting
Yes.
to research, a topic, to go to a general
Presentation.
session and get the information and start from there, and
Absolutely.
then take it to the
And if
next
somebody
step.
just wants to call me on that number, again, it's 229-1895, and I could just let them know, what's available in their community as well. If it's not right here at the library, what other presentations do I have coming up that they might be able to attend?
Okay, well, we certainly will post your phone number
Wonderful.
and the websites. There is the website for the New York State Partnership for Long-Term Care, and then also the New York State Department for Insurance. This is a very, very valuable service and benefit to folks in Albany County that are interested in long-term care insurance options that are out there, and long-term care planning. I think we were talking a little bit before we started taping about how unique Albany County is, that we have a specific individual, and it's not just falling under the umbrella of all the services that
Right.
the Department for Aging may be
Right.
providing to seniors. So we're really grateful that you're here in Albany County to provide this to seniors. I know for myself personally, it's been very valuable speaking to you today. I've learned so much
Good,
that
wonderful.
will help me to serve with the seniors and the
Yeah.
other town residents that may call on this information. So
Wonderful.
I want to thank you very much for joining me today, Catherine. It's been terrific.
Great. Thank you very much, Chris.
You're welcome. And thank you for joining me on Senior Resources. My name is Chris Cary, and you can always contact me at 459-5051, the Town of Colonie Senior Resources Department. Thank you, and have a great day.
Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.